Good afternoon to everyone joining us today, and welcome to Export Development Canada's 2014 Annual Public Meeting webcast. My name is Phil Taylor. I am the spokesperson for EDC, and I'll be your moderator for the day. Alors, bon après-midi et bienvenue aux web émissions de l'Assemblée publique générale 2014 d'EDC. Je me présente, Philippe Taylor, porte-parole d'EDC, et je serai votre modérateur pendant l'Assemblée. Well, just before we begin, please note that we are webcasting today's session using simultaneous French translation. So, if you would like to listen in French, simply click on the button labeled Français that is on your screen. Pour notre auditoire francophone, nous offrons une traduction simultanée. Alors, veuillez tout simplement choisir le bouton Français qui est disponible sur votre écran. Veuillez noter par contre que les présentations seront sous-titrées aujourd'hui, tandis que le restant du webinaire sera traduit en direct. Well, our purpose today is to offer EDC stakeholders and the general public an opportunity to learn about EDC and to avail ourselves to your questions about our business activities, our business model, corporate priorities, and our guiding principles. Now, during last year's APM, we discussed how the world economy was still looking to find its feet somewhere between recession and recovery. In 2013, we began to see nascent signs of economic growth in the global economy, particularly in the U.S. during the latter part of the year. As a result, Canadian exports grew by a healthy 3.6% in 2013, suggesting that we might finally be heading in the right direction. Well, within EDC's own business results, it seems that Canadian exporters and investors are pushing ahead with their international growth plans. In order for us to tell EDC's story effectively, we've broke it down into 4 distinct parts, which are mandate, operations, finances, and then corporate social responsibility. Those perspectives will be delivered by the group joining me today, so allow me to introduce our panel. We have Warn-Schindel, EDC's new chairman of the board of directors, Benoit Daignault, our very own new president and chief executive officer, Kember, our senior vice president of finance and chief financial officer, and Signi Schneider, EDC's vice president of corporate social responsibility. So welcome everyone. Well, for our viewing audience, we want to let you know that the brief presentations by Kevin, Benoit, Ken, and Signi were pre-recorded. However, we are all here live to take your questions after these presentations, whether it is to add to or clarify the information presented or to address any areas that have not been covered. So to begin, we will listen to EDC's new chairman of the board of directors, Mr. Warn-Schindel.
Good afternoon. My name is Warn-Schindel, and I was appointed chairman of the board of directors for EDC in June 2013. I came to EDC with a long investment and banking background, having spent a number of years with OP Trust Private Markets Group, Australia's Macquarie Bank, and RBC Capital Markets. This background has given me the foundation to dive right into EDC's business, its commercial model, and partnership preferred approach to delivering benefits to Canada. To my mind, the importance of EDC's work is a given. 1 in every 5 Canadian jobs is directly linked to exports, and trade is one of the most effective ways to drive economic growth and Canadian prosperity. As we all know, recently this growth has been hampered by a lingering period of global economic sluggishness that has also taken its toll on Canadian businesses. Despite this, and despite the geopolitical unrest that we are currently witnessing, EDC's forecast calls for an improved global outlook in the U.S. and other developed countries. If this forecast bears out, these trends should boost Canada's exports in the years ahead. But to fully reap the benefits of this potential, we need to strengthen our competitiveness. And in that mission, EDC has an important role to play. I have been particularly impressed to see firsthand what EDC does for Canadian businesses looking to grow their international footprint, a footprint we have helped them leave in more than 180 countries around the globe. EDC takes a leadership role in going further afield globally on our customers' behalf. More than 30% of EDC's business is helping Canadian companies in high-growth emerging markets. Our efforts here outpace the national exporting average by a full 20%. The benefits of these efforts are felt right here at home. Last year alone, EDC facilitated trade helped generate more than $61.9 billion of Canadian GDP. That equates to nearly 570,000 jobs, or 3.2% of national employment. Put another way, that number translates into about 4 cents out of every dollar of national income earned in Canada in 2013 coming from the business that EDC facilitated on behalf of Canadian companies. These are very meaningful numbers. The board's role in these efforts is, first, to ensure good governance, but we also challenge management to set aggressive performance targets. In 2013, we wanted to see better use of EDC's capital strength to the benefit of Canadian exporters, particularly for small and medium-sized companies. The board also focused on making sure that EDC is a player in the government's new Global Markets Action Plan, or GMAP, aligning our efforts on markets of greatest promise. GMAP also intends to increase Canadian SME presence in emerging markets to 50% by 2018. And clearly, EDC has an important role to play in building more export momentum for this sector of small and medium-sized companies. Within these numbers are approximately 5,000 Canadian SMEs that used EDC's services to help facilitate $11.6 billion of their business. 15% of SME business was in emerging markets, a very encouraging sign that Canadian SMEs are making progress and joining the ranks of Canada's exporting elite, and that we're already making progress on our GMAP objectives. Many of you may be aware that the government has introduced permanent regulations for how EDC will interact with the domestic market in March of 2014. These new laws bring to an end the broad temporary domestic mandate that EDC has been using since 2009. The revised regulations are designed to allow EDC to participate in trade-enabling domestic transactions and to help make Canadian exporting companies stronger here in Canada. We believe that the proposed regulations offer a clearly defined and appropriate role for EDC in the domestic market. These new rules place strong emphasis on the need for EDC to complement the private sector. We remain committed to our partnership-preferred philosophy in this area and will continue to maximize private sector participation in domestic trade transactions. And of course, we will continue to work with our sister crowns, like the Business Development Bank of Canada, to make sure that we fill market needs in as many areas as possible. Before closing, I'd like to thank the many people throughout the Government of Canada who have worked on behalf of Canadian exporters this past year. The Trade Commissioner Service, Embassy and Consulate staff, the Departments of International Trade, Department of Finance, amongst many others. All have had a hand in helping EDC help Canada's exporters and investors. And from the board's perspective, we have certainly benefited from an excellent working relationship with our colleagues within the greater government family. Part of that greater family now includes Stephen Poloz, EDC's former president and CEO, and now governor of the Bank of Canada. I would like to thank Steve for his 14 years of service at EDC, most notably his last 2 as our CEO. It also speaks to the caliber of executives at EDC that the board's full confidence in Pierre Gignac was also well placed, as he demonstrated true leadership in the role of EDC's acting president for a critical portion of 2013. That confidence was on display again with the appointment in February of Senior Vice President of Financing and Investments, Benoit Daignault, as EDC's new president and CEO. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention the tireless executive team, leaders and employees at EDC. These 1,200 men and women are incredible agents of Canadian export growth. Their drive and energy is second to none, and I am delighted to have joined the team as chairman. Thank you very much.
Having heard from the chairman about how EDC delivered upon its mandate, we will now listen to EDC's new president and chief executive officer, our very own Benoit Daignault, who will summarize EDC's operation results from 2013.
Bonjour à tous, mon nom est Benoit Daignault, je suis président et chef de la direction d'Exportation Développement Canada. Comme j'ai été nommé chef de la direction en février dernier, c'est aussi ma première assemblée publique annuelle. Similar to Kevin, I also came to EDC with a private sector background. having spent over 20 years with different financial institutions, including 10 years at G Capital, before joining EDC in 2004. Since then, I have spent 8 years overseeing EDC's business development group, and the last 2 leading the financing and investments group. Having a decade to get to know EDC's customers in Canada and around the world has had a great impact upon me. I'm always very grateful for how they share knowledge about growing their business globally, knowledge they earn in the hard way in the trenches of international trade. That knowledge will inform my tenure as a CEO, as my focus will be on getting even closer to our customers and finding ways to make it easier for them to use our services. À cet égard, le conseil d'administration et l'équipe de la haute direction ont travaillé ensemble pour développer des approches et des stratégies pour mieux répondre aux besoins des exportateurs et des investisseurs canadiens, et ce, toujours dans un contexte assez incertain. En 2013, plus de 6 000 exportateurs et investisseurs canadiens ont eu recours aux produits et services de EDC pour faciliter des activités à l'étranger totalisant plus de 95 milliards de dollars, une hausse de 9 % comparativement à 2012. Comme l'a dit Kevin, les activités que DC réalise au profit des exportateurs canadiens sont l'un des mécanismes qui aident le gouvernement à atteindre les objectifs commerciaux du plan d'action sur les marchés mondiaux. To that effect, we can look at 3 key initiatives where EDC can bring the greatest value to Canadian exporters and investors, as well as contribute to the government's Global Markets Action Plan. Specifically, we will help drive our customers' business in emerging markets. Second, we will evolve our product and services to make sure they are relevant to today's marketplace, particularly those most often used by small and medium-sized businesses. And third, we will create opportunities to connect Canadian companies with foreign buyers. So let's start with emerging markets. Last year, EDC facilitated more than $27 billion of Canadian exporters and investors' business in 145 emerging markets, 4% more than the previous year. That's roughly 30% of EDC's total business. The markets where we saw notable growth last year were in the Middle East, with roughly 63%, Chile 61%, Central Europe 42%, Russia 29%, and finally China with 9%. Now looking into the short-term future, we continue to see good opportunities for Canadian exporters and investors in markets like India, like Brazil, and like Mexico. In the medium term, EDC is looking at the Andean region and Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia. And for Canadian companies with long-term interests, EDC continues to be bullish on sub-Saharan Africa with countries like South Africa, countries like Angola and Ghana, offering good opportunities in infrastructure, for example. The second area is helping more SMEs grow their exporting business by making sure that we deliver the right service in the right way at the right time. So Kevin mentioned a few key results in this area, so I'd like to cover off a few examples of how we're doing more for SMEs. J'aimerais débuter par l'expansion de notre programme de garantie d'exportation. Ce programme permet essentiellement aux PME d'obtenir des liquidités additionnelles pour couvrir les coûts relatifs à de nouveaux contrats par l'entremise d'une garantie de EDC au bénéfice de la banque de l'exportateur. Nous avons repoussé la limite de risque pour ce produit qui est passé de 75 % de couverture à 100 % de couverture. Ce type de financement répond à un besoin criant des PME qui ont besoin de fonds de roulement additionnels pour saisir les opportunités à l'exportation. The change we're making for SMEs that we are most excited about, however, is the complete transformation of our credit insurance program. This is a longer-term project, and I will have more concrete information for you in 2015. But let me tell you a little bit about it. Credit insurance is the product most used by small business, making sure they get paid and freeing up critical working capital. We are in the process of taking that product completely online so that SMEs can use it anytime from anywhere and get instant buyer credit ratings and policy approvals. Finally, I'd like to close with a summary of EDC's trade creation activities, which is how we help Canadian companies connect with foreign buyers. The foundation of these connections is the development of financial relationship with foreign corporations that can be leveraged to introduce new Canadian supply and services into their global value chains. In 2013, EDC added 30 new relationships through $4.6 billion in financing with foreign corporations. We also executed 25 matchmaking sessions last year that resulted in more than 200 introductions between foreign buyers and Canadian suppliers. Of all exporters supported by EDC's trade creation activities in 2013, 91% were SMEs. And last year alone, more than 500 Canadian companies won their first supply contract through these connections. I can't think of no better way of delivering meaningful value to the customer than introducing them to their next buyer. J'aimerais abonder dans le sens de Kevin à propos des 1200 personnes travaillant à EDC. Leur détermination, leur motivation et passion sont vraiment formidables. La réussite d'EDC est leur réussite. Inutile de dire que je suis très fier de diriger ces gens d'un talent extraordinaire. And finally, to all of our customers, thank you for your business. It has been a privilege to be a partner in your trade success, and we look forward to helping you grow your business in 2014. Merci infiniment. Thank you.
Having heard from Benoit, we will now turn it over to Ken Kember, EDC's Chief Financial Officer, who will provide a fulsome overview of EDC's financial performance over the past year.
Bonjour, j'aimerais prendre quelques minutes pour vous présenter certains des faits saillants de nos résultats financiers pour l'année 2013 et aussi de vous parler de nos prévisions pour 2014 et pour après. Let me start with a short historical recap of the last 70 years. EDC was established in 1944 with $1 million of capital from our shareholder, the Canadian government. Since then, the government has put a total of $1.3 billion of capital into EDC. EDC has grown that $1.3 billion to over $11 billion, including the dividend declared a couple of months ago in February. EDC will have paid dividends totaling $4.1 billion back to the government, effectively returning the government's capital 3 times over and retaining over $7 billion on our own balance sheet. But more importantly, over the same period, EDC has supported $1.2 trillion in exports and investments, helping Canadian companies do more business in more markets around the world. 2013 continued that track record of delivering strong financial results. Our balance sheet grew from $36 billion in 2012 to $42 billion at the end of 2013. This was the direct result of record new loan signings and disbursements during the year. $18 billion in new loan signings and $14 billion in new loan disbursements, mainly in the areas of telecom and media, oil and gas, and automotive sectors. This led to net financing and investment income of $1.2 billion, a 15% increase over 2012. Nos programmes d'assurance qui ont une incidence moins grande sur notre bilan sont toutefois très importants pour les exportateurs, particulièrement les petites et moyennes entreprises. En 2013, nous avons couvert les activités de nos clients à hauteur de 77 milliards de dollars au moyen de nos 4 programmes d'assurance, soit l'assurance crédit, l'assurance d'institutions financières, l'assurance et cautionnement de contrats et l'assurance risque politique. Ces programmes ont généré 193 millions de dollars commissions, direction fait des frais de l'assurance. Nous avons aussi reçu en 2013 des commissions de garantie de prêts totalisant 36 millions de dollars. Nos garanties de prêts sont un bon exemple de l'appui offert aux entreprises par EDC en collaboration avec les banques canadiennes. Par exemple, dans le cadre de notre programme de garantie de l'exportation, nous répartissons le risque avec les banques pour que des petites et moyennes entreprises puissent percer de nouveaux marchés, acheter de l'équipement, accepter de nouvelles commandes ou effectuer un investissement à l'étranger. On the expense side, we had administrative expenses of $310 million. We control our expenses by carefully managing our productivity ratio, which indicates how much of our net revenue we spend on administrative expenses. We aim for a productivity ratio of 25% or less. For 2013, we had a productivity ratio of 22.7. The better result was a consequence of running with a lower than expected staff complement during the year and lower depreciation expense. We expect the 2014 productivity ratio to be closer to the 25% level, as our staff levels have returned to full complement, and we also commit more resources to increasing awareness among small and medium-sized businesses on how EDC can help them grow their business internationally. The final areas of our income statement are provisions for credit losses and claims-related expenses. For credit losses, in 2012, we needed fewer provisions because we implemented new probability of default and loss given default assumptions. So we reduced our loan provisions by $340 million. In 2013, we set aside $30 million of provisions based on changes in the credit quality of our current loan portfolio. Selon les conditions relatives au crédit et les changements dans notre portefeuille de prêts, la dotation à la provision se situait normalement dans une fourchette allant de 0 à 200 millions de dollars. Quant aux charges liées au sinistre, elles se sont chiffrées à 159 millions de dollars contre 38 millions de dollars en recouvrement en 2012. Ce résultat, principalement attribué à la réduction de la valeur recouvrable d'une indemnité importante liée à une assurance risque politique versée une autre année. So the bottom line for 2013, $817 million of net income, a relatively normal year for us in terms of what we'd expect. Over the last 10 years, our net income has ranged from a low of $206 million in 2008 to a high of $1.475 billion in 2010. This volatility mainly comes from our loan provision and claims-related expense lines. We take on large exposures in risky markets on behalf of Canadian exporters, and so changes in those exposures can have a big impact in our income statement, both positively and negatively. La bonne nouvelle, c'est que notre bilan nous permet de faire face à cette volatilité. Avec plus de 10 milliards de dollars en capital social, en résultat non distribués et en provision, nous avons des assises financières solides. Nous pouvons donc affronter cette volatilité tout en générant une remise pour accroître notre capital et verser des dividendes à notre actionnaire. For 2014, as outlined in our corporate plan, we're forecasting a net income in the same range at $781 million. We also expect our capital expenditures to grow to $36 million from $27 million in 2013 as we make significant investments to modernize legacy IT systems with a focus on credit insurance in 2014 and 15. And we anticipate our capital position to remain at the AAA solvency level as we prudently manage our risks and grow our supply of capital through operating income. All of this adds up to continuing our long-standing trend of financial sustainability and resiliency so that we can help more Canadian companies access more international markets in the years ahead. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Oh. Our final presentation will be from Signi Schneider, EDC's Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility. CSR is an operating principle here at EDC, and it is part of our business model. Each year, we strengthen our practices in this area, and Signi's presentation will inform us about EDC's CSR activities in 2013.
Hello, I'm Signi Schneider, Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility at EDC, and I will be speaking about our efforts in corporate social responsibility this year. Comme vous le savez peut-être, le rôle de DC est d'aider les exportateurs canadiens à réussir dans le domaine du commerce international et à les appuyer dans la quête de nouveaux débouchés commerciaux. Ainsi, nous nous retrouvons souvent dans des marchés et des secteurs pouvant poser des défis éventuels sur le plan de la RSE. Ces défis incluent les actes de corruption ou des impacts environnementaux et sociaux potentiellement négatifs dans les transactions qu'on appuie. Cela étant dit, nous sommes une société d'État représentant le gouvernement du Canada. Nous devons absolument nous assurer que nous soutenons des activités menées de manière responsable. C'est ce que le public attend de nous et ce que nous attendons de nous-mêmes. In the global banking industry, we know that financial and insurance products can often outpace the development of international standards. As a result, the role of CSR within these new developments is not always clear right away. I'll give you an example. Loans that directly finance an investment project, such as large infrastructure projects, are generally benchmarked against very specific international standards. The OECD Common Approaches for Export Credit Agencies and the Equator Principles for certain financial institutions are two of the more well-known sets of standards. In these cases, it is very clear what's required from us when we conduct an environmental and social review. However, other services that we provide, like accounts receivable insurance and corporate loans, don't have similar international benchmarking standards. It is precisely because of these types of grayer areas that we undertook an initiative last year to help us clarify our own values and risk thresholds. Internally, this initiative gave us more discipline for when we evaluate the potential CSR risks of transactions for these types of financial products. It also makes it much easier and predictable for our customers because they know what to expect when they come to us. These are all part of our ongoing refinements to bring greater value to our shareholder, civil society, and our customers. Nous nous sommes aussi efforcés de participer aux conversations qui portent sur les pratiques exemplaires à l'échelle internationale. Nous avons collaboré avec nos homologues à l'OCDE ainsi qu'avec les institutions financières adhérant au principe de l'Équateur. Deux exemples viennent à l'esprit. Cette année, nous avons contribué au travail des organismes de crédit à l'exportation de l'OCDE et des institutions financières adhérant au principe de l'Équateur portant sur les droits de la personne. Nous avons aussi participé dans les discussions de révision au sein des principes de l'Équateur. Ces mises à jour comportent des nouvelles références aux droits de la personne ainsi qu'aux principes directeurs des Nations Unies. En participant dans ces discussions, nous tâtons de marquer le pas avec des changements dans le domaine des examens environnementaux et sociaux qui ne cessent d'évoluer. Cela nous permet aussi d'effectuer une analyse comparative de nos propres pratiques afin de nous assurer d'être sur la bonne piste. I should also mention that we made some good strides in our efforts to support companies within Canada's clean technologies industry, which is a priority sector for EDC. We made this sector a priority because we see both the massive opportunities and the important environmental benefits. With some of the world's best cutting-edge technologies, these Canadian customers are helping to reduce the negative environmental impacts in many industries. They're also helping their own companies be more efficient, productive, and profitable. We recognized that these Canadian entrepreneurs have challenges moving past the development phase. Many aren't mature enough for bank financing or commercial bonding and insurance. So we've made it a priority to stretch our own risk appetite in order to help some of these clean tech companies grow beyond the domestic market. In fact, last year we helped more than 20 of these businesses that were in a critical phase of their growth story. We also just recently launched our first green bond, a $300 million 3-year global offering to support financing for environmental-related business. Our current portfolio of green assets includes loans made to companies that remove pollution or contaminants from air, soil, and water, or help alleviate some of the effects of climate change. Pour nous, ceci a été une occasion idéale de répondre aux besoins de nos investisseurs et de renforcer l'engagement envers l'industrie canadienne de technologie propre. L'année 2013 a été très chargée. Nous sommes fiers de nos réalisations, mais reconnaissons qu'il reste beaucoup de travail à faire. Our efforts throughout the year will be provided in much more detail in our annual CSR report, which will be released on our website at the end of May. We hope you take a look at the report, and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you. Merci.
Having concluded all of our presentations, we will now begin to take questions from you, our audience, on all of the topics covered here today. Now again, this is a live question and answer session, providing you with a direct access to EDC's leadership. So to submit a question, simply click on the question button on your screen and we will respond to them in the order that they are received. In the event that we are unable to answer your questions today because of the time limitation or that the specificity of your question could not be fully answered here, I will personally be answering you by email within the next few days. Alors, pour notre auditoire francophone, vous pouvez à tout moment poser une question en cliquant sur le bouton « Question » qui s'affiche à l'écran de l'interface du webinaire. And with that, we'll go on to the first question. Benoit, we've had a question in your presentation. You mentioned, and Kevin did as well, that the new government regulation on domestic trade, or new regulations, which put an end to our temporary ones. Does it mean that EDC can insure AR, which is accounts receivable insurance, from the domestic side?
So we're talking about here insuring a sale
I believe so.
A domestic receivable. So the answer is no, we're not able to do that anymore. So during, when we had special powers, we were able to provide insurance both for international risk and domestic risk. Now we are not able to do it directly. However, we still have an arrangement with the private sector where there are some global policies. If companies need global coverage, international and Canada, we have an arrangement with the private sector where we can still provide through EDC coverage that is ultimately provided by the private sector. But that's a piece that we're not able to offer anymore as part of our now permanent powers from a domestic perspective.
Great. Merci, Benoit. Next question, Benoit, we'll be going back to you. This is some of our, one of our customers, actually. They're asking this question. How does Cuba fit into EDC going forward? What can we help customers do in Cuba?
So we have been active in Cuba for many years. However, it has been a very challenging market. We are working with banks and with private sector banks to be able to provide trade support, mainly through government entities. Now, this being said, we have some limitations in terms of longer-term support, let's say long-term financing and things like that. So our approach with Cuba tends to be on a case-by-case basis. So my suggestion, because we have some limitations there, my suggestion is for our client to connect directly with EDC's account manager, the person responsible for covering the account, and kind of look at the specifics of the need, and then we'll be able to provide the clarity in terms of what EDC is able to do or not to do.
Thank you, Benoit. Ken, I have a question for you. Some question we're aware that EDC is financially self-sustainable, but we are also profitable at the same time. Can you break down how EDC is profitable, and maybe we'll do it by business line if we could?
Sure. Thanks, Phil. So yes, EDC is profitable. We operate on a commercial basis, and so if you look at our the main product lines that we cover, that would include our lending programs and our guarantee programs. And so for lending, we charge interest at market rates of interest. We often do a lot of that lending in partnership with the private sector. So that's done on a commercial basis, and we earn loan interest revenue on that. And then for our guarantee program, we charge fees, again, market-based. And similarly for our insurance program. So whether it's accounts receivable insurance, where we charge a premium to cover Canadian exporters against the risk of their buyer not paying, or programs like bonding or political risk insurance, all those are premium-based programs. So our income is really comprised of that loan interest income and premium income.
Thank you, Ken. Interesting question. Benoit, Ken, Signi, I think we can all jump in on this if you like, so just feel free. We've got a question here. Does energy management, which is meaning saving electricity consumption, is that part of our clean tech or clean business sector approach? If you will, Benoit, maybe we'll start with you.
The answer is yes, it is. Actually, we have quite an extensive initiative on the clean tech side. And what we're seeing here on the clean tech space is that there is a need for mainly bonding and shorter term support to help companies winning contract on the international front. And if you actually bid for a contract, let's say it's related to energy management or energy savings, in a lot of cases you have to post bonds to be able to stand behind your product and your representations. And we actually extended quite a lot of support in that space over the last 12 to 18 months. So it's definitely something that is on our radar.
Good. Ken, Signi, anything to...
Maybe I would just add that there are numerous videos about clean tech companies that we've supported in the past on our website. And if you're interested, you can get a fairly good sense of the kinds of companies that have been targeting EDC for that kind of solution.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Ken, I think this will be a good question for you. How does a company qualify for credit insurance, so accounts receivable insurance, and I think that's specifically what this question is referring to. Is it the same as the bank in the private sector?
Yeah, so it's a similar process. As I mentioned earlier, we operate on a commercial basis. So we would be looking at, I guess, first of all, the company's own credit management practices and making sure that they're appropriate. But the big question is the buyer that they're selling to and the credit capacity of that buyer. So we take all that into account and do our underwriting under normal practice and get back to the client, and that's the basis of our program.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Another question on Iraq, whether or not we are open to business at this time. I believe we're restricted, but Benoit, perhaps you can shed some light.
Yes, we are. We have restrictions, and well, actually, it's a very difficult market, as you know. So at this point we are restricted in terms of what we can do in Iraq.
So very much case by case.
Yeah, it's very much case by case and very difficult to qualify.
Okay. Benoit, another question for you.
Dans le rapport de l'an dernier, last year's report, India was the destination of the future. You talked about Indonesia and sub-Saharan Africa. So is there a change in our way of seeing things? No. No, the answer is no. It's interesting to see where the opportunities exist for exporting. Oftentimes, in a particular sector, it would be interesting for certain products. For us, India is still an important destination. We continue to believe that long term there's an extreme positive potential. This being said, in India, it's mostly in the infrastructure domain. As you know, it's something that's very long term. So this being said, not all companies deal with the infrastructure. There are other sectors. So depending on your sectors, business opportunities that will be there will be in different domains throughout the world. So what we're trying to do is trying to help and cover Canadian markets and companies that have a special need. In certain markets, we see that there would be additional growth that would happen there, and we try to be proactive in that type of market or company. Either the Canadian companies already present on the field, or we expect that Canadian companies will show a definite interest in the next 12 to 36 months.
Questions that we have for now. So I think with that reply, we have no more questions. We will conclude our webcast for today without some time left, but we'll still move to close here. Again, if any question happens to pop up after our time, I will personally respond to that question for you. So if you miss the time frame, no problem. We will get to your question. Thank you for participating in EDC's annual public meeting webcast today and for sharing your questions and your suggestions. Alors à tous ceux qui ont assisté à notre web émission, nous vous souhaitons une excellente journée de nombreuses réussites dans vos activités sur les marchés mondiaux. On behalf of the chair, the executive, and everyone here at EDC, we wish you a great success in all of your international business efforts, and we remind you that EDC is always here to help. Thank you, and have a great day.